welcome to another episode of Immigration and Mobility Decoded. I am your host, Eric Prado, and today I am joined by Aaron Flynn, the Director of Ireland Immigration at Envoy Global. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. You are now a two-time participant. How does it feel?
Feels awesome. Thanks for having me, Eric. Always a pleasure to talk about immigration. So, yeah, looking forward to having a chat today.
We're going to start to do the Saturday Night Live approach, where if you're on 5 times, we'll give you a gold jacket, with like a big logo on it. But how's it going overall, Aaron? I know the last time we were on the show, or you're on the show, I think it was almost a year ago at this time. A lot has happened in the world of Irish immigration, which we'll get to in just a few moments. But how are things going on your side of the Atlantic?
Yeah, really good. Has it been a year? It doesn't feel like a year. It does in some ways and it doesn't in others. Yeah, we're busy. Immigration at the moment in Ireland sometimes has no changes forever, but feels like it's had like some of the biggest changes that have ever happened in the last maybe 5-6 months. So it's a really interesting time in Ireland in general in immigration and kind of broader picture of what's happening in Europe and maybe globally. So yeah, it's very very engaging to be working in this area at the moment, and yeah, really enjoyable.
Before we start talking about some of those changes, I do have to ask. You're an EPL guy, right? I think we chatted about this previously, and the season just ended. So how are you feeling?
I have to say, Eric, it's a relief that the season is over. I'm glad.
Who's your club?
My club is Tottenham Hotspur, Spurs, as they call them. They had an up and down season. They had a new manager from Australia, and he started off really well. They won 10 or didn't lose 10 on the bounce. Ended up in top of the table close to Christmas. The fans started to dream, and it all fell apart after Christmas, and they ended up losing a record 4 games in a row.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, for the first time in like 20 years, and ended up 5th. So to qualify for Europa League. So yeah, up and down, but yeah, EPL is a different beast. It requires constant monitoring of football news and statistics and deadlines and just multiple competitions. It's great, but sometimes it's just a little bit overwhelming. So yeah. I'm glad to get the vacation, as I'm sure the players are.
Definitely. The season started back in August.
Yeah. It's a long season.
Yeah, it's a long season, definitely.
Tottenham finished their season away at Sheffield and immediately boarded a flight to Australia and have gone down there to play an exhibition match against Newcastle in Melbourne in the MGC, the biggest stadium. It's usually cricket and Aussie rules football. So those players have had no break. And then there's European competition. The Euros are on this year and the Copa America is on. So they don't really get much break. We get a break, thankfully, but they don't get much break.
Yeah, it's constant turnaround. But I mean, hey, those guys are world class athletes for a reason. And it is enjoyable to watch. This was the first season that I kind of started to get into EPL thanks to a fantasy league that I joined with some buddies.
Oh, great.
I don't have a club yet. I'm still getting to know all the players. The only guy that I know is Holland, but I think most regard him as the best player. So I think that one's kind of easy. But there are a few days where you just put on like 5 games at the same time, and throughout the week there's just a whole slate of games. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, that's good. You got to pick a club. I'll help you pick a club.
Perfect.
Just don't pick the one I picked because you're not going to have any glory.
Well, it's actually funny that you. Oh, well, funny and hurtful, I guess, if you're the fan of Tottenham. But as I'm sure you've seen, but the NFL, the American football, they've been increasingly adding more games in the UK and overseas. And the team that I root for over here in the States, American football, the Chicago Bears, are actually playing a game at the Spurs Stadium in October.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you should go.
Yeah, yeah. I get an option. I have a season ticket for Tottenham, so I get first option to purchase the NFL ticket.
Oh, nice.
And it's one of the only stadiums that they built that stadium with the specific design to host American football.
Yeah.
And the stadium converts, so the pitch floats in underneath, and the
Yeah.
NFL pitch comes out, and the dressing rooms are big enough to house the team and the equipment for NFL. And yeah, it's really popular. And I haven't been to one yet. I haven't been able to get a ticket. I'd love to go. So the Bears are. Who did the Bears play this year?
The Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh, the Jaguars. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
everyone thinks that they're eventually going to move to overseas because they have like one or two games there every year. But
Hmm.
who knows? Who knows? But Aaron, as much as I would really love to talk sports with you, um, I do want to give you an opportunity to chat and showcase just some updates and your analysis on the latest happenings in Irish immigration. A lot has been happening, as you've mentioned. Um, and so I just wanted to start with a more recent update, uh, where the new stamp one regulations for spouses and partners. Um, I think this kind of had been in the works a little bit. And actually, funny enough, we're working with you on developing a question for. I'm going to tease it a little bit. Our upcoming EMEA trends
Oh,
survey, and the question we had worked with you to craft. This hadn't happened yet, and so just want to learn more from you about what is this change and what does it mean?
yeah, it's interesting that we had it in the EMEA Trends report, and then this change happened. In Ireland, there's three main types of employment permit. There's what's considered the best type of employment permit, the critical skills permit. That has allowed your spouse to join you immediately, and your spouse gets a right to work without an employment permit. So it allows a family to relocate. Lots of people relocating to Ireland are graduates, maybe started their career, so it's really important for them to be able to relocate with their families. The other two main types of permit are general employment permit, which is less critical in some ways, in that it may not be a very highly skilled. In reality, it probably is very skilled, but it isn't for immigration or employment permit terms what's considered a critical skill. Historically, they haven't been able to bring their spouses. There was a waiting period of 12 months, and when the spouse did eventually join, they didn't get a right to work. They just got an immigration permission. That spouse had to get their own employment permit after they arrived in Ireland. And then ICT permits, intra-company transfers for people who were temporarily assigned to Ireland, same thing. Spouses didn't get a right to work. They just got a residency permission. So the government announced last week that the spouses of all employment permits will now get Stamp 1G, which is a permission that allows employment without an employment permit. So it immediately changes things for employers and for people who are relocating, and it makes it much more attractive for Ireland to get that top talent, particularly for ICT people, which is usually, management, key personnel, or people on training contracts. You'll need that overseas top talent sometimes to come in to help scale up the new entity. And if they can't bring their spouses, it means they're less likely to do full term of a 2-year permit. And so that was definitely an area that was been looked at. General employment permit, there's a huge amount of people on general employment permits in Ireland. It creates this kind of division and it splits up the families. So it was interesting that the government has decided to provide all of them with this right to work. The background to it, Eric, is there's what's considered to be full employment in Ireland. The unemployment rate it's like 2-3%. So there's still a huge amount of employment needed from overseas workers, and extending this right to all of the employment permits really makes a huge difference for employers in Ireland and for everybody who is moving and relocating and sponsored employment permits. So it's great, really, really positive development.
Definitely. I could definitely, I think it'd be like, yeah, put like myself, yourself in those shoes, and if you're offered a job opportunity in a different country, it's like, of course you want your spouse to come along. Um, Aaron, when this change was being discussed, when the government was discussing it, had this been in the works for a few years, or was it exacerbated by like the COVID recovery that a lot of other countries are kind of going through right now, where they're just that high demand for workers?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's definitely been a campaign, I would say, or like almost like a policy-driven submission been made by various people who are involved in immigration, maybe NGOs, maybe companies like Envoy who have, big corporate clients and had been making representations to government. The the changes, they're probably in the pipeline, I would say 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. But it's really been exacerbated in recent months as Ireland is now competing, particularly post Brexit, with other countries for companies and their workers. And the choice of destination for operations within the EU, Ireland is obviously heavily dependent on foreign direct investment. And if we can't attract people who can bring their spouses in Ireland because of this type of policy, then those jobs are maybe going to go to another European country or maybe somewhere outside of the EU who has a more flexible approach and who will allow dependents join much easier. So I think at this point, it's probably a combination of submission, maybe data-driven representations, as well as Ireland recognising we're really competing with other countries to try and attract this top-level talent and these companies to scale up operations or to pick Ireland as the developmental place for new divisions and new opportunities.
Definitely. So, Aaron, what are so we're recording this on May 23rd. What's the timeline? How quick is this going to be implemented? And what are some things that employers and their employees or people who might be looking at Ireland, what are some things that they need to know moving forward?
So the implementation is almost immediate. It's come into effect pretty much at the time of announcement. And let's say for people who've already joined their spouses and are in Ireland, they're on a permission called Stamp 3, which is a residency-based permission. They can immediately apply to renew or change their permission from Stamp 3 to Stamp 1G and commence work as soon as they get their residence permit, which at the moment is a little bit delayed. So what we would advise and what employers should do is maybe think about the population that they have of general employment permit holders, because now their spouses, if they're here, who they may have supported with in terms of the visa process to bring them here, they can now effectively apply and have their permission changed. But I suppose another important factor is for companies that are right now either assessing or thinking about bringing people to Ireland, and it's going to be a general employment permit, that whole message has to change and the advice around it has to change in terms of we're really relocating people. It's a huge move. We all know it's the biggest move you'll ever do. You're changing country, you're changing your home, you're changing employment, your family setup. Right now, those companies need to think, I have to get this updated information, this updated policy to my worker, and also reconsider any, redeployment or mobility that they've had in the pipeline for a little bit to basically explain, now you can bring your spouse and your spouse is going to be able to work. So it needs almost immediate attention because there was no lead-in time. It was announced and it comes into effect immediately.
Gotcha. And that's the biggest difference between other countries' immigration systems and the U.S. Their implementation happened right away. In the U.S., it takes forever for things to kick into effect, if at all.
Yeah, it does for this, but it doesn't. I think we're going to talk about something else a little bit later. It takes much longer.
Mm.
These types of immigration in Ireland is based pretty much on 4 or 5 pieces of legislation. The rest of it is what we call policy. It doesn't actually exist in law. It exists in written policy or general guidelines that the government departments create.
Yeah.
These types of things can be changed quickly because they don't need to change the law. They don't have to go in and amend the legislation. They can just change their policy. So they just announce it, put the policy up on their their internet page, and
Hmm.
it's ready to go.
Yep.
And yeah, you know, even if you look at some of the information, you'll see it's not updated yet. A lot of the information will need to have, you know, complementary updates made it. But but yeah, thankfully this one is pretty quick.
Yeah. What advice do you have for human resources teams and executives and others, just to be able to be nimble in situations like this? Change comes in, it's implemented really quickly. You mentioned they have to update uh, plans accordingly quickly. For companies who aren't used to such a quick change, or maybe just to always ensure they're ready for the latest development, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, that's a good question, Eric. I guess the biggest advice or piece of advice I could give is having data on your employees is key to any decision making and policy. Having a good overview of your employee records in terms of who you have, your population, what permission they have, having somebody who's got a dedicated function from within HR for mobility or immigration who's responsible. Uh, Obviously, companies like us, like Envoy, we push this news out immediately when it happens, and we're going to strategize that with our clients as soon as it happens. We've probably told them already that this is in the pipeline. We certainly put this information out last year. Envoy had its immigration day in just over 12 months ago in Dublin last year, and the two responsible ministers, Minister Richmond and Minister Coveney, came along. And at that point, they, in their talks to us as immigration professionals, said that this was something that they were considering. So being plugged into a provider who's on top of these changes and having good data and information on your population is key. And then working your immigration policy, if you have one, to tweak it and be ready to basically absorb the positive changes that come out of these opportunities. Because if you're not ready or you don't understand it, maybe as an employer you're struggling to fill roles, and there might be now a pool of candidates that you didn't realize you would have.
Speaking of another change, Aaron, that I wanted to discuss with you, that is the Ireland intends to introduce a single permit for both work and residence permits over the next 3 years. Can you break down break down this change, what it means, and what's coming up?
Yeah, this is a good example, Eric, of the opposite of policy and why this one takes longer. This has been in the pipeline for a long time. It's the single permit directive, as it's called. It's an EU directive. Ireland decided not to opt into it, didn't have the capability. Historically, has acted in tandem with the UK in relation to immigration matters because of the common travel area between the two countries and the similar legal systems, and both been slightly separated from continental Europe. But at the moment, just to take an example, critical skills employment permit, Indian national. To come to Ireland, they have to do an employment permit first. When the employment permit's approved, then they have to apply for an employment visa at the embassy. Both processes are in different government portals, have different documentation. The visa appointment requires in-person attendance, biometrics, huge amount of documentation. And when the visa is approved, then they come to Ireland. They're stamped by the Border Management Unit, or the GNIB, which is the immigration police, on entry to Ireland. And then they have to register for their residence permit, which has to happen within 90 days. So it's almost like a three-stage process to get an employee into the country, which hugely overlap, a huge amount of documentation, and critically require absolute coordination of timing to make sure the process all works harmoniously so that that employee can start at the time the employer obviously wants them to start when they come to Ireland. That's what we do on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. We manage it because we know how to manage it. We've done this successfully for years for our clients. Obviously, there's a huge amount of waste and overlap. Other countries have single permit in some format or another. Other European countries have it under the single permit directive. The US has it for some visas, as you know. Canada has it. So, yeah, it's something that needs to be done. The difficulty with bringing in this change is we're talking about three different government authorities. We're talking about Employment Permits Department for employment permits. We're talking about Irish embassies overseas for the visa part, some of whom will process via visa processing agencies that Ireland and other countries use, like the VFS. And then when you get to Ireland, you deal with Immigration Service Delivery, which is another immigration department to get your residence permit. If you live outside Dublin, you have to engage with a local police station for the district in which you live. So you can imagine the amount of human interface, the amount of information, the amount of documentation. So the Single Permit Directive will combine all of those documents in one. And what the government are doing at the minute, they had a working group on it about a year ago. They were due to report, I think about 6 months ago at this stage. So the report has now come out. The government's committed to making the change and opting in to that EU directive. Lots of the directives need to be formally opted into and then implemented by Irish laws. But in reality, they'll have to change their processes, combine those three different government departments. And what they're going to do is they're going to build a new government portal to do all of those three things in once. So it's a huge opportunity to exploit modern technology and make this a much easier and a far better process for everybody, for the government agencies, for employers, for employees, and for companies like us that work every day with employers trying to move people into Ireland.
What's the timeline for all this? What can employers expect in the next year, 3, 5 years?
Yeah, they've said in this latest announcement that they're going to try and do it within 3 years. I hope they can. I'm not sure they will be able to. I think what will happen is it'll be incremental and maybe piecemeal change. I think what will probably happen is they'll combine the visa and employment permit processes first, and then later add the immigration registration part. The immigration registration, as I said, it differs between whether you're based in Dublin, where most of the population and most of the employment permit immigration registration is, and outside Dublin. Just recently, they've added additional counties, suburban Dublin, I guess you could call it, Wicklow, Kildare, Meath. They can now register in an online government portal. And that's almost like a trial to extend that online registration to all of the counties of Ireland. So you will no longer have to engage with local police. The huge difficulty at the minute is because it's local police, smaller teams, some of the other cities, Cork, Limerick, Galway, have big populations, not just of employment permit or sponsored workers, but also of students, because there's universities in those cities. And the universities are semestered, as you know, same as the States, so they tend to arrive at the same time. They all need registration at the same time. They all need renewal at the same time. So there's huge delays in some of those regions, particularly Cork and Limerick. So extending online registration to the whole country will obviously remove that. But I think that's likely to be the last piece of this single permit directive. I think the next stage will be scoping out, get the portal built, do some testing, probably trial it on a couple of countries initially. And then if it works, start to build it out for other countries. And hopefully, fingers crossed, in 2027, we're talking about the single permit directive and we can see a single permit.
I think that's a good date to circle on our calendars.
Yeah.
But Aaron, what with the single permit directive combined with the new Stamp 1 regulations for spouses or partners, what do these two changes signal to you about the government's ambitions to attract foreign talent or to attract talent?
Yeah. So Ireland has definitely seized the opportunities that technology can bring and has tried to streamline quite an antiquated and document and process heavy system that's been in place. Immigration in Ireland, the sponsored immigration, it's relatively new. It's only about 20 odd years old. And in that time, a huge amount of people have moved to Ireland. The benefits of it to the economy, to the companies that are growing, to the multinationals that have based here are beyond doubt. You know, if we look at the success of Ireland as a country economically, we can definitely see that Ireland has benefited hugely from all of the factors that have led to this. And I think Ireland recognises that as a country. And it's these types of initiatives that are really setting Ireland up for the next 20 years, where, as I said, it's considered full employment in Ireland. We can't fill the roles that we need, and we won't be able to fill the roles that we need. It's changed a little bit in the last couple of years. ICT or IT type roles were the top ones in demand. Pretty much, you know, over the last 4 or 5 years, the biggest tech companies in the world are all based in Ireland. Lots of them have their European headquarters here. Now it's healthcare, both doctors and, you know, some of the other health professionals. It's construction, it's agriculture, it's horticulture, you know, the traditional industries of Ireland. They can't find people. Ireland can't function without immigration. It's as simple as that. And as I say, in a world where each country is trying to attract the best talent, the best system, and the best long-term opportunities are the ones that expats are going to choose to go to.
Definitely. Agreed. I think we're kind of seeing that somewhat play out in Canada, the neighbor up north here in the U.S. You know, just all the changes that they've made to attract foreign talent, and you know they're also seeing an increasing foreign national student population. So I see, I get where you're going. So, Aaron, a while ago you mentioned that some of these changes or some of the aspects of Irish immigration, some are based centered around the laws already written, others around policy. How much of that policy is influenced by the Prime Minister? And I'm asking because another recent development was the Irish PM stepped down, and there's a new one. So overall, what does the new PM believe the role that immigration plays, and how much does he influence policy?
Yeah, that's an interesting and topical moment, I guess, to think about immigration in Ireland. It's extremely topical right now for various factors. We've got European elections upcoming, so electing members to go to the EU Parliament. A lot of EU countries have immigration as a hot topic for differing reasons, maybe, you know, positive reasons like employment and sponsorship. The Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, stepped down. We did have a rotating Prime Minister for the last few years because we've got two of the biggest political parties, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, sharing a coalition and sharing a rotating Prime Minister, or Taoiseach, as we call it. Leo Varadkar had done quite a few years, considered very positive for Ireland, you know, came from immigrant father from India and an Irish mum, qualified as a doctor, had worked in various government departments, including in the Employment Permit Department, which is called the Department of Business at one point. So was acutely aware from his own personal background and his professional training and his professional career as a politician of the necessity, if we can call it that, of immigration for the success and growth of the country. Right now, immigration in Ireland has radically changed over, 10 years, maybe even 5 years. We've obviously got the situation with Ukraine. Ireland has over 100,000 Ukraine nationals here on temporary protection. It's the biggest per quota country in terms of the amount of people that have come to Ireland. And with that, international protection applicant numbers have also increased. But that has coincided with the success of a country, a growing population, and a housing crisis. And the word crisis has been used because housing's always been a really important topic in Ireland for, 150 years. And at the moment, post the economic depression in 2008, Ireland has never really caught back up with building the amount of housing units that it needs for its population, and its now expanding population. So there's competing demands there. And in the messaging from the new Prime Minister, Micheál Martin, lots of it is recognising that there are challenges in immigration, which there certainly are, but also the necessity of it, including in construction, to help get Ireland out of the difficulties that we're in with this housing shortage. And the party, Ireland has never had a right-wing party in government. It's never had an outward right-wing government or an outright right-wing with an immigration focus, government party or political party. But it has become an important topic for Micheál Martin and his party, Fianna Fáil. So the European elections, all of the candidates have, a huge part to say about immigration, and local elections, which are kind of more councillor based. They also have all had to speak about it. So, it's a challenging time, and there needs to be a coordinated government approach. And that's the messaging that's come from government, is that they're going to get a handle on it, and they're going to basically, the positive changes that we've spoken about, they have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe a little bit more intuitive policies designed to work within the European framework to make sure we're complying with our international obligations, because we're a signatory country under, the refugee aspects and subsidiary protection and those types of things, to make sure it works correctly for the benefit of those people, some of whom definitely need refuge, and the people who are in Ireland. So I think the policy might refine itself a little bit, not completely dependent on the public mood, but with certainly a nod to what's happening publicly and what people are saying about immigration.
Want to go back really quick, or forward. I find it interesting. You mentioned the housing shortage. Ireland is not unique to that. Other countries are, experiencing housing shortages. And one specific industry you mentioned, construction. Knowing that Ireland has full employment, what are industries like construction doing to, maybe not even doing, but are they experienced? Do they know how to utilize talent to help, build more houses to meet the shortage? Or is this kind of a new and unique time for these companies within, in this instance, the construction industries?
I think the construction is interesting in that pre-2008, there was a construction boom in what they call the Celtic Tiger. The economy was booming. Unfortunately, a lot of the growth in the economy was based on internal construction and an internal property market. So people selling property to each other, which obviously wasn't sustainable. And then with the economic global difficulties, that led to pressures. But at that point, the big construction companies were able to rely on in EU immigration. So people coming to work from within the EU, maybe from other recently acceded countries like Romania, Croatia, Poland, maybe Hungary. Lots of the construction workers came from those countries in that pre-2008, or maybe in and around that period. Afterwards, Ireland, like lots of the countries around the world, had economic difficulties, but got out of it pretty quickly on the basis of a conservative economic policy. Now that pool of talent that came from those countries isn't immediately available because they're working in other countries, maybe countries that are closer to home where they've come from, like Germany or France, maybe Italy. So this has been a huge problem, and the government recognised this in November, December. They announced the biggest changes to the employment permit lists that have ever happened. So in Ireland, there's two main lists: the critical skills list that we spoke about, which is the highly skilled people that are really in demand. And then there's another list, the ineligible list of occupations, which are jobs that don't qualify. You cannot get an employment permit for them. Lots of the typical construction jobs were on that list because the policy is you should be able to fill them from within Ireland, or if not, from within the EU or the EEA. But the reality is, and construction companies have obviously been able to show their empirical data on this, that they haven't been able to fill those roles. So they've taken lots of them off the ineligible list, and now you can hire an employment permit. And now we have the additional changes. Some of them will be general employment permit, but now you can bring your spouse. So it's back to being, very attractive for employers. So I think construction companies may not have been aware of immigration as a source for talent, but now are definitely going to be aware. We're talking to companies about this, where they can find workers, what the process looks like. They're obviously needing to plan their projects. When are they going to be able to start? When will the workers arrive? And yeah, we can partner with them to capitalize on the recent changes that have come in December. We're only about 5-6 months from then. There have been quite a big increase in employment permits in that area, and I think likely this year we're going to see a huge increase for the rest of it. The government yesterday also announced a new housing policy that they're going to bring in, where they have a plan to fix the housing market and the housing crisis that they're going to work on, which is obviously going to have a huge aspect of it be based upon the ability to construct based on personnel.
Are there any other industries that you foresee utilizing immigration more moving forward than they might have in the past, just based off of these recent updates?
Yeah, so the restaurant industry has been a high user of it. We've helped some companies with that. I think that's likely to continue to grow. So yeah, service industry, hotels, restaurants, healthcare, definitely. The doctors that we spoke about, their critical skills permits, but the other healthcare, the healthcare associate professionals, if you could call it that, healthcare assistants, old persons' homes, absolutely huge increase in that. There's been some changes in eligibility, or then you've got the other, horticulture seasonal worker permit has been spoken about as a solution to temporary workers coming in to assist, probably Irish horticultural, farming, that type of industry. And then Ireland historically was agricultural based, and the meat industry is a huge employer in Ireland. It's one of the backbones of Ireland's exports, physical exports, and has been for many years. They've had their quota extended. It's used up quickly every year. We have some clients in that space. When a quota is announced, you need to be ready to go quickly. You need to be able to deploy. Most of those companies have to labour market test, meaning they have to advertise. So you have to be agile to be able to do that. But yeah, I see those areas increasing. ICT, as I said, has eased off a little bit, but I think that's likely to pick back up as those companies who maybe have been through rifts in the last year, or maybe a little bit longer than that, have leveled out. The economic situation will change in the States, and I think they're likely to see an increase again, and it remains a popular destination for people in that space. I think people will want to come to work to Ireland because of the opportunities that are available, including long-term residency and citizenship, which lots of people who do come here, maybe as students, end up staying and becoming citizens.
Well, speaking of citizenship, Aaron, how does one obtain Irish citizenship? I guess, can people obtain citizenship if they are not if they were not born in Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, citizenship. If you live in Ireland for 5 years on a work-based permission, so an employment permit, or the Stamp 1G permission that we spoke about, you can apply to naturalise as an Irish citizen. And it was formerly quite a laborious process, took a couple of years to do it. It was like a 30, 40 page physical application form, documents proving your 5 years residence, copies of documents. And again, another example of Ireland's move to modern processes, that's been moved into an online portal. So we've got some companies that we look after all of their immigration, their employment permit, their visas, but they actually view immigration as a benefit for their employees. And we assist the employees when they get to the 5 years with their citizenship application. We submit it on their behalf. We prepare the application in the portal, and the companies that they're working for are very happy to do that because it shows they've settled, they're committed to Ireland. The company's obviously committed to Ireland. So yeah, that's a huge change. Far better process, much quicker, better for the authorities. And yeah, now decisions are reached in a little bit less than a year. And Ireland has no prohibition on dual nationality. So once you get Irish citizenship, you're now an Irish citizen, you're an EU citizen, so you can live anywhere in the EU. Your family members who maybe aren't EU citizens can accompany it under EU law. And then uniquely, because of the common travel area between United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland and Ireland, you can go live in the United Kingdom because there's full free mobility between those two countries and always has been since independence in the 1920s. So it's kind of almost unique to get Irish citizenship to let you do this. And the other side that we see of it is a little bit unique maybe, but also other countries have it, which is citizenship by heritage. So Italy has it, Spain, Portugal, Ireland obviously had a big emigration population all the way back to 1840s and maybe before. If your grandparent was born on the island of Ireland, we can register your birth. And when we register your birth as a foreign birth, then you can apply for an Irish passport. So we register you as a citizen. Again, online government portal, documentation into each generation. And we do that, lots of that, for corporate clients because the complexity around traveling around the world, the Irish passport's it's in most of the passport indexes in the top 10, and just gives you huge flexibility. If you're in the States and you're Irish heritage, maybe grandparents left, and you work for a company that needs you to travel to Europe, you've potentially got to enter the Schengen zone, you have to count your days, you're restricted on the amount of days. If we register and get you your Irish passport, you're now an EU citizen. When you come back, you need to work in your French entity or your German entity. You just present your Irish passport and entry. Don't need to count your days. So it's a fantastic thing. And lots of people have approached us to do this, and we file applications pretty much all the time. And yeah, the processing time for that around COVID really increased up to like 3 years. But they've cleaned out the backlog, and it takes about 9 months now to do foreign birth registration, which is citizenship by heritage.
It's really awesome to hear the benefits of Irish citizenship. It almost feels like there's just so many more. You just mentioned like being able to travel and live in the UK, but then other European countries. It just opens up a lot of opportunities, if you will. For I guess final question on that, Aaron, is that in order to obtain Irish citizenship, if you had grandparents born, do you need to go through an employer for that, or is that something that individuals can do outside of work?
You can do that outside of work. We obviously help lots of companies with their immigration program. Sometimes those employees will reach out. We might have engaged with them to do their employment permit or visa, and we might mention later you'll become entitled to citizenship if you have Irish heritage. And we'll engage with them directly. And actually, we help lots of people. I'll I'll give you this example, Eric. We helped somebody from the States move, and we got their critical skills permit. And the grandparents want to go visit the grandchildren in Ireland. And they're thinking about retiring and spending a little bit more time with the grandchildren. And the client is a corporate client, and their employee will maybe refer the grandparents to us on a personal or a private client basis. And we'll file the foreign birth registration to make it easier for the grandparents to come to Ireland, or to come to visit the grandchildren in the other European countries that I spoke about, or maybe the United Kingdom. So yeah, it's something we do both on the corporate front and also on the private client front, and sometimes on both, because when you're applying for the heritage, the foreign birth registration, if you've got siblings, you should file all of those applications at the same time, because it's mostly the same documentation for the two generations beforehand. And we've had clients we've done it for, we've recommended doing it for the siblings, and it hasn't happened. And then that sibling's at home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and they're showing, hey, I got my Irish passport. And the brother or sister's going, hey, I wanted to do that. Why didn't, hey, you should have told me you were going to do that. And they say, yeah, we did. We spoke about it. So, yeah, we often help one person connected to us, and then we'll end up helping all of the family. And it could extend it to cousins. And, yeah, so it's a good process. It's document heavy, can be a little bit complicated depending on when the grandparent left. Might need a little bit of research in the background, find documentation. But, yeah, we do it all the time. So, yeah, huge advantages. Highly recommend it, and if you're entitled, capable of doing it, definitely something. Probably the top recommendation I give most of our clients in the last 6 months to a year.
I'll have to. I mentioned this last time, but I'll have to let my brother-in-law know. As I believe
Yeah,
his grandparents, or at least one set of grandparents, was born in Ireland. So I'll have to let him know.
yeah, to
Well, Aaron, this has been a very insightful conversation. A lot of things happening with regards to Irish immigration. We're nearing the end of May. What's on your? What are you looking at with regards to the rest of the year?
Yeah, so I think for the rest of this year, I'm thinking, because of the changes and the pace of changes, to expect the unexpected in some ways. I think things can change very quickly. That's obviously something the government is committed to. I think for lots of our clients, we're telling them about the changes so they can be reactive. Labour market testing, as I said, for some of them is going to be key. The other parts of it, change in processing time. There's been a huge increase in applications. There's lots of changes in process. They've changed process twice in relation to Stamp 4, which is the critical skills renewal and long-term residency. So, yeah, you really need to be plugged in and have your advice coming to you, because if you're not aware of those changes and the processing times, or just new process, and you've taken your eye off it or you're switched off, you're going to get lost, or you're going to get employees drifting out of permission, maybe complexities around travel. So, yeah, for me, I think expect the unexpected. I think going to be an increase in pretty much all of the areas in terms of employment permit and visa filing. And because of that, that's the messaging that we're giving to our clients is, execute your plans if you have them now, because things might change. And yeah, things are going to improve. Lots of Ireland comparatively works quite well. And I think it's going to get better. Might take a little bit of time to get the last parts of it better, but it is going to get better. So yeah, I'm really hopeful for the future for the rest of the year. I think Ireland's in a pretty good place, got some challenges. I think they're going to be, through coordinated government approach, resolved, and we're going to be in good shape for the next few years for immigration. So yeah, really positive about the rest of the year.
Awesome. Appreciate the insights. Again, thank you so much for hopping on the show today. You are on LinkedIn, or how can people find you if they have questions about Irish immigration or potentially want to work with you.
Yeah. LinkedIn is where I put a lot of the updates. I tend to be quite prompt on when something changes. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, and yeah, we have an Ireland email address. I can call that out, Eric, if that's useful for people.
We could put it in the description. We can type it out. Yeah.
Yeah. We do get lots of queries to that address because we put out, lots of useful information. Yeah, find us on LinkedIn. Contact us if you have any queries about you, your family, your company, your employers, and I'm sure there's options that we'd have that would help you with whatever your plans are. But yeah, it's a good space to be in at the moment, and yeah, we always look forward to talking to new people, meeting new people, talking about their journey to Ireland. Maybe it's the start, maybe it's the end, and maybe it's people we've worked with before or have come to us by reputation. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Always happy to have a chat about immigration. It could be a quick question. Happy to help. Just shoot a quick response across LinkedIn. And
Aaron, it's been a pleasure talking. We'll chat more and use this time to recover from the most recent EPL season. Look forward to the next Spurs season.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Thank you
Always a
so much,
pleasure to
Aaron.
talk about immigration. And yeah, thanks for your time today.